comic like a clown, no noses, all pages. Bagging, boarding Batman in the gutter like amazing storytellers. We some fellas, we some felons in the mazes. Acapella, varicella, cause the shit is so contagious. Mouse on the summaries, compiling guide the show. While the cycle spitting knowledge on the Yeti like a pro. Beat the babble, we the rabble, don't step to the squad. We get active, it can haters like a cephalopod. You don't like fish talk? Do you hate a tomato? We the cuttlefish killers, tentacles on the table. Rate us 5 stars if you cherish your life. Bucky Barnes hit squad spraying lead in your pipe.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Is This Just Bad? Is This Just Bad? The best podcast you never heard of. I'm your host, Professor Mouse, joined as always by the CB Cosmologist himself, Evan Almighty.
It's mighty be Evan.
Bruce Almighty even.
Is that when Batman's in the chair, the Mobius chair?
Yeah,
or new god,
or when he and Shaggy are working to figure out the case, or when he's doing the Carlton dance in Fortnite.
Yeah, right. Or when he's fighting Shredder with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Why is Batman the most humorless superhero who simultaneously is the most farmed out by DC Comics? They're like the sanctity of Batman, but also here he is in Scooby-Doo.
It's so funny because he's like the least weird.
Yeah.
In terms of, he doesn't do cosmic shit very often. He doesn't have superpowers. He's just a dude with a belt and too much money, and yet that's the guy you send into space and send into alternate realities and send back in time and send over to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and send to Fortnite. Right. Is it because he's like sort of an audience stand-in?
Yeah.
Batman's so weird because he's not relatable at all. He's not approachable in the slightest, and yet we're like, yeah, I could be Batman.
Well, here, let's do this. Let's overcomplicate this because this is
what the
show.
Occam's Weed Whacker. Let's go.
So, the answer. What's the answer? Right? Who cares? But here's my theory.
Now that we've established that nobody gives a shit, let's talk too much about it. Occam's Weed Whacker.
So I think that the reason you bring Batman in is because he is low-key and discerning. His central motivation is to discover things, which is not...
He's a detective.
He's a detective, in fact. he is a tiny electric mouse of a superhero. And he doesn't suck the air out of the room because Superman is just purely reactive. He doesn't figure anything out. What does he do? Right. Speaking of picking up the strain of our conversation last week, there are very few superheroes that you can't put Green Lantern into this shit because he has all these powers. They're too distracting. You can't put Superman in there because of the power thing, but also because he's like much more reactive rather than proactive. Batman, you can actually put him with the goddamn what are they called? The mystery team? The gang, the Scooby Gang. They're in the Mystery Machine. They're in the Mystery Machine.
The Scooby Gang,
and they're the Scooby Gang. You can put him into that world and have him figure out a mystery in ways that you can't do with any other DC superhero. You can't put Booster Gold in Scooby-Doo. That would be fucking insane.
I would love to see the Question hang out with Velma.
Like Cyborg just doesn't make any sense. Nobody makes any sense in that world. I think that the Marvel equivalent is probably like Spider-Man. And didn't Spider-Man and Batman cross over?
They did. There was this heyday in like the late 90s, early 2000s when they were crossing over all the time. And Batman and Daredevil and Batman and Spider-Man. Yeah. And they were the ones who, you're right, they are the most proactive and they're the most inquisitive. Like Superman, he's constantly, like you said, reacting to things because he's so powerful. I think inherently these days, it's too unrealistic to have him actually solve anything proactively. So we'll just have him stop earthquakes. And even when he tries to solve problems, despite having all of those powers, his first step is to always fly into it with his head. And like, I'm going to punch it and throw myself at it.
Did you ever...
If that doesn't work, I'll think about using my actual powers.
Right. Did you ever play the game... Fuck, what were those games called? Like Injustice? The fight.
Yeah, the Injustice games.
Yeah, Superman's whole shit was just like punch. Like he had the freezing ice breath and the laser eyes and shit like that, but mostly he just like punched you really hard. And that's kind of the extent of his whole like characterization. And so, yeah.
Well, and that's very in character for him. It's like, because his whole shit is like, partially because he's raised on Earth and he's like pulling his punches, but also because he's never learned to harness his powers effectively, I guess.
Well, I think it actually makes sense because it does show one of Superman's limitations. And I don't know how intentional this is, but why would you learn to fight if you're that strong?
Exactly.
Why would you learn any type of martial art if you could punch everybody into oblivion? You wouldn't.
Yeah, he's so much. It fits with the Kryptonian arrogance that sort of underlies his character, the holier than thou aspect to him, which is, yeah, he's so OP that like I can get by just throwing a punch. And then he's forced to, like, think about stuff eventually. Which is so interesting because, like, he starts out in the 30s being super proactive, beating up landlords. And then Grant Morrison will occasionally have him, like, solving super puzzles. But generally, he's just, like, punching stuff. They're doing a really nice job with that with the Superman and Lois show, too, where, same deal. He has never had to learn because he's so much more powerful than everyone else. Right. And there's a fight early in the show where he punches somebody and it turns out that guy's super strong and he's like, oh, huh. And then has to like do a whole Mortal Kombat sequence of freezing the guy in midair and then punching him way harder and blowing him up with, you know, his heat rays or whatever. But it's always the second thing he resorts to. Whereas somebody like Batman is his weakness in some ways. He's proactive to a fault, right? Like that's where you get into trouble with Tower of Babel, where he's so proactive that he's solved problems that aren't there and accidentally caused new problems.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, he just creates problems. That's I like the idea of, I mean, this is what's the equivalent of like a pro wrestler? Like this reminds me of The Wrestler in a lot of ways, where it's like trying to keep the DC ship afloat amidst positive ruin. Like that's what it seems like the Fortnite crossover is just like hobbling towards death. But just trying to to keep it together. Did you see The Wrestler? He dies at the end of that.
You're talking about the Mickey Rourke movie. Yeah. I was like, wait, are you like I was thinking like, do I have to come up with a wrestler analog for each of these heroes? No, you mean the
Randy
Wrestler,
the Ram.
the movie.
Yeah, Randy the Ram, that wrestler, the one that dies in the ring. Like that's kind of where I feel like when I saw that news, I'm like, oh yeah, DC Comics is it's over. It's over. They're done. There's no coming back from this. The only thing that you can do is just siphon off your Batman content and get licensing fees. And he's going to be on fucking plushies and keychains and anything that they can put him on to make some goddamn money.
I would like to point out two things. One, we've been doing this podcast for what? Some version of this for like 4 years now. Yeah. I feel like you said this on the first episode.
I mean, it's not gotten better.
That's fair. That's fair. We were reading Doomsday Clock on our very first episode, so it has not gotten better since then.
Not only were we reading Doomsday Clock, but a DC streaming service was released and folded over the course of this fucking podcast. Like,
that's true. This podcast is older than the DC streaming service.
Yeah.
And at least as successful, I guess.
No, it's
brutal.
it's inarguably more successful than the DC streaming service, which is like so sad to even think about. But you had two things.
The other point, two things. The other point is that we have also been to Six Flags together, and he's already on plushies.
Yeah,
and
that's
keychains.
true. There's nothing quite as bad as that Superman ride, according to people who do roller coasters. It's kind of the gimmick is that you go up real high and you come down, but the rest of the ride kind of sucks. And I do remember there being like there was a Heath Ledger themed Joker ride at one point that I'm not sure is around anymore.
Probably not.
But it's weird. Yeah, it's like, it's the Betamax. Like DC, the DC heroes are at Six Flags, and then the Marvel heroes are at Disney World. Like there's an obvious, you have an obvious preference there. I wonder if they're gonna do. Maybe this already exists because I'm not. There's a whole subculture around amusement parks that I find to be totally inaccessible. But it exists. Like there's whole podcasts dedicated to them. There's like, Tumblrs and subcultures and all this shit. But I wonder if there's like a Galaxy's Edge type thing for Marvel.
It's being built right now.
Is it being built? That
Yeah,
I
it's
would
being
go
built
to.
currently. There are plans for like an Avengers Academy thing, and I'll go do it with you.
Yeah, that sounds really fun.
It looks sweet.
Will there be there and they can do it like a Professor X's mansion and shit because
Eventually, yeah. Now they have the rights back. I don't know if they would want to do that yet until they've got like MCU approved character designs.
Yeah,
Because otherwise, they'd probably stick some of the 90s era animated aesthetic on there for now and then replace it with other stuff. Because, that 90s shit is classic, so.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
Big yellow rides.
They haven't cast the X-Men. Like, there's no conception of what the Disney version of the X-Men are, except for, I guess, Quicksilver. That
sort of,
yeah, kind of, like, not really. That would be a fun place to go to. I also want to go to Mario Land in Japan. There's a.
Oh, that looks so cool.
Did you see it's like crazy. The guy that made Mario did like a whole like press thing around the park, and I mean, I don't know that a more wholesome individual exists. He's so the guy that made Mario and Luigi. It's insane. I mean, he's so that guy that I question him honestly. Like, what are you hiding? Because he's just like walking around like happy. There's Koopa, everybody.
He's just on a bunch of mushrooms constantly.
Yeah, even the bad guy in his world, Bowser, is like awesome, like very fun, light, cool. The original bad guy, Donkey Kong, is now like a good guy.
Mario has a real Fast and Furious aesthetic to it, where like nobody can stay evil forever, and they all play tennis.
Yeah, yeah.
They even all race around together in cars. It is Fast and Furious.
God, how'd they come up with such a simple idea? I mean, it truly is just the character design that they do, and they put them in golf, and they put them in tennis, they put them in cars racing each other. We got Mario Kart 8. It's great. The one for the Nintendo Switch, it's like very, very fun. And it's such a simple, kind of stupid game. It's immediately understandable. There's no learning curve whatsoever. There's a slight learning curve. Literally the curves. Turning is difficult.
The curves are the learning curve.
Yeah, we realize that the best way to win at Mario Kart, and I think that this has been the case all along, is the person who drives the best. Because you're always going to get nailed by a fucking like a shell or something. You're always going to get fucked up. But everybody is. That game is chaos. You're all driving and getting hit with shit. And it's the person who is able to maneuver the best that ultimately wins.
That's definitely true. It's all about the fundamentals.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening, but I would feel remiss if I didn't talk about something I experienced this weekend, which was like it was a flashpoint moment in my life where I realized that I'm a older guy. So
so you did not become Batman.
unfortunately, no.
Not wrong kind of flashpoint. Got it. Okay.
So, but you ever like witness something in pop culture you just don't understand?
Frequently, based on TikToks that make their way to Instagram, because I'm like 2 levels removed.
Right. So, I mean, and this is all sort of related. So, back in Who Cares, Iron Mike Tyson fought Roy Jones Jr. Boxers, old school boxers, both guys in their 50s. And the event, I watched the event, and it was hosted by a company called Triller. Triller is, and I had to research all of this because I was befuddled, I was dumbfounded, I'd been run amok.
Bamboozled.
I was been bamboozled. Triller is a TikTok ripoff. It's essentially when you download Triller, which I had to do.
Wait, can we stop for a second? Stop for a second.
There's a lot. There's a lot.
I just need a point of clarification, then you can move on. So you're not saying that you saw this fight years ago. You're saying that they fought now.
Yeah.
In their 50s.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And that's not even the event that confused me. So that event, they put it on Triller, this app that's TikTok like. You have to download it in order to access the pay-per-view to buy it. I grew up watching Mike Tyson fights and Roy Jones Jr.'s fights with my dad. And then later, just with my friends or whatever, and so I was like, this is a little nostalgia. I'll watch it. And right before they fought, a guy named Jake Paul fought a guy named Nate Robinson. Now, I knew Nate Robinson, which is why I was confused. It struck me much like when they tried to convince me that Pikachu was a goddamn detective, and I was not buying that. They told me Nate Robinson, the basketball player who won the dunk contest, who's 5'8", who jumped over Shaquille O'Neal. I remember Nate. They called him Kryptonate. Because
that's cool.
Back in the day, Dwight Howard, he was called Superman, and they used to compete in the dunk contest. So it was Superman and Dwight Howard, and Kryptonate would battle one another. It was great. I love Nate Robinson, and he was a guy that was literally on every team. Like, you would be watching a game, and he'd be on the Knicks, and then you'd be watching a game the next week, and he'd be on the goddamn Celtics. You're like, how did this happen? He was on every team, and so he was fighting a guy named Jake Paul, who's a guy on YouTube who, I don't know what he does, to be frank, and this is sort of where I enter my confusion.
Yeah, because Jake, I know there are a couple of Pauls.
Yeah, he has a brother named Logan. Yeah, there were also.
Yeah, and Logan was famously, I want to say, weirdly racist on YouTube. And got banned.
Well, so what he did...
One of them did something weird in, the Japanese suicide forest that was very, the faux pas of going to the forest.
Yes, I mean, I think it was...
that might have been Logan and Paul.
I think it was Logan. I can't really tell the difference between them. I mean, they've both done, fucked up shit, from what I can glean, from what I can surmise. They've both done fucked up shit. I think Jake Paul got, was just wilding out and spreading COVID all over the place. I mean, just they're whatever. They're in their mid-20s, white guys from Ohio who are they have every advantage in life. and they
except that they live in Ohio, perhaps.
Well, yeah,
but everything else.
And now they live in LA. They make millions of dollars doing YouTube. I don't understand how it works. Obviously, we do this podcast. We could figure it out.
Right.
We just didn't even attempt it.
No.
So I saw that fight, and then Jake Paul beat the shit out of Nate Robinson, which is okay, I can understand that from what I heard from the ring announcers who were not professional ring announcers. In fact, one of them was Snoop Dogg, who I believe is an expert at rapping. There's no.
And has some cachet in cooking now.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
spent enough time with Martha Stewart that he knows what he's doing in the kitchen, both with and without weed.
And he's probably got some pretty deeply rooted expertise in cannabis. So he was there.
He even has a football team. Man is multi-talented, but I don't know that he knows anything about boxing.
Well, no, and I learned that the hard way because I had to mute the telecast because he was just saying a bunch of dumb bullshit. So Nate Robinson, so Jake Paul knocks out Nate Robinson. Who cares? The next fight is Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones, and it's weirdly competitive. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I didn't hate this. It's kind of like it's weird because it's boxing and there's so many, the stakes are so much higher, but it's like when they renew a television show that got canceled or that just simply stopped and they, decide to continue it with the actors in the contemporary. Mm-hmm. The only one I can think of is Roseanne, which was a debacle, but there have been others that have been, I think, they're just doing it right now with How I Met Your Mother. They just announced that they're doing a How I Met Your Father. Yeah, that's happening.
Bizarre.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like that, but the stakes are much higher. And so when I watch them, I mean, they're obviously not in the best in the shape that they were at when they were in their prime fighting, but it was competitive. It was like, oh man, that's Roy Jones, and Roy Jones was infamous because he didn't throw a jab. He didn't have the kind of like square style that you would normally see in boxing. He's just kind of like floating around, flying around, throwing bizarre punches from weird angles. And then Mike Tyson is very much just lumbering forward and seemingly trying to knock him out in what was sort of shown to be an exhibition. So I was like, cool. So they do another event, Triller, this past Saturday. And so I had this experience and it's like everybody's talking about it. I'm, keyed into like boxing, fighting podcasts and stuff and follow them on social media and stuff. So everybody's talking about this fight. And so it's Jake Paul again, but this time he's main eventing. And so I'm like, okay. But what really catches me is that he's fighting a guy named Ben Askren. Now, if you don't know who Ben Askren is, Google Jorge Masvidal KO. And you will see the fastest knockout in UFC history. Jorge Masvidal, who is a big sort of, he was a celebrity until he endorsed Trump. in my household, me and my brother used to love him a lot. There was this fight that was hyping up Ben Askren, NCAA champion, world wrestling champion, et cetera, et cetera. Fights Jorge Masvidal. They're talking shit all the way up to the fight. They're both very good at it. Ben Askren is a huge wrestling fan. Jorge Masvidal is a psychopath, and so they're able to sell the fight. I mean, Jorge
They're great at trash talk.
Yeah, Jorge Masvidal came out dressed as Scarface. He came out dressed straight up like Tony Montana to the press conference. It was fucking just straight up WWE. So they sell the shit out of the fight. The fight ends spectacular in 6 seconds. Jorge Masvidal flies off of the fucking cage, knees Ben Askren in the head, punches him, and then, to top off the WWE, K-Fob counts him out, gives him a 1, 2, 3, as he is lifeless on the ground. And so Ben Askren, that's what you'll likely see when you Googled him before Saturday, but was a legit fighter. He was a great wrestler, and so they tell me that Jake Paul is fighting Ben Askren, which does not make any sense to me because a number of reasons. 1, Ben Askren retired. 2, Ben Askren is 36. 3, Ben Askren is your height, which is to say 5'6" or
Small.
something.
5'6" is generous.
I mean, and 4, Ben Askren got hip replacement surgery. 5, Ben Askren got 12 weeks to train. And then finally, 6, Ben Askren does not know how to box. So there is all of this sort of like gatekeeping around the MMA community where they're like trying to convince themselves that Ben Askren is going to win this fight. Because they're like, this guy's a YouTuber, blah, 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 this, and this, whatever. So to get to that road, I watch what is the most confounding live program I have ever seen in my life. Triller put on a multi-million-dollar live event in Atlanta, Georgia, that because of social distancing and because of like COVID protocols is very, very sparsely attended. So there are massive acts playing music. There's a West Coast whole performance where Too Short comes out, and then Ice Cube comes out, and then Snoop Dogg comes out. It's massive, and they are playing to an empty room. One
like 20 people.
Yeah, and it's just it's insane. And then Saweetie comes out, who's a new artist, and then Doja Cat comes out, who's a new artist. So there's a bunch of this is a Coachella performance.
Yeah, it sounds like a Coachella lineup for sure.
And but so here's what it's not though. It's not boxing, because whenever we have fights at the house, whether it's boxing or MMA, I mean, what are you seeing for the majority of the night?
Yeah, fights. There's prelim fights.
There are no prelim fights. In fact, there are prelim fights that happen that night that are not being televised. Instead, they're televising these live musical performances.
I'm so confused.
And so there was one guy, I wanted to see one fight where there was a reggaeton guy who was fighting another guy, and I was like, well, that's a fucking crazy circus fight. I want to see that. And as I'm watching the performances, I'm like, when is this going to start? And then I look on my phone, and it's like, the fight's over. They did it already. They just didn't film it. And you're like, what? And so finally they cut away from one of the performances, and they cut to Pete Davidson. Everything about this is so weird. They cut to Pete Davidson.
Anything you could tell me gets exponentially weirder when Pete Davidson is involved. That dude freaks me out.
So they cut to Pete Davidson, who is who is befuddled. He's confused. He's been run amok. He's been bamboozled. He
is not detective.
He's absolutely not detective. He's standing there. It is so poorly produced that he is just kind of riffing until he says, and there's another Staten Island boy here, and then you hear the classic woo of the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Who joins Pete Davidson, and the two of them walk over to an enclosed cage where two large men engage in a slap fight, which is where the two men or women take turns slapping each other until one of them knocks the other out. And
do we know who these men are?
No one knows who anybody is. Ric Flair is confused. He doesn't know the rules. Pete Davidson is confused. He's sitting on a forklift. It truly is just like a makeshift ramshackle place in the back. Meanwhile, there's actual boxing happening that they are not showing us. And so there's no referee on site. Ric Flair is supposed to be he's supposed to be calling and making sure that the guys don't pull away and that they don't flinch, and that whatever the rules are, he's supposed to be regulating that. He doesn't realize that. He's also probably under the influence like everybody else at this event, and so it's just kind of happening, and then the guys are getting mad at each other, and then finally one knocks the other one out, and then they cut to another musical performance, and you're like, what's going on? What
the hell?
What am I seeing? Finally, they start fighting. And the first fight is Frank Mir, who's a former UFC heavyweight champion, and a guy named Steve Cunningham, whose nickname is USS, like a naval ship, because he was a part of the Navy. So it's the USS Cunningham. Clever, right?
Oh, that's funny.
So Oscar De La Hoya, who is wasted.
Okay.
Who is wasted. Is dragged into the announcer's booth, and they want him to call the fight between Frank Mir and Steve USS Cunningham. He doesn't know who either of them are, and he's wasted. And then they cut to a close-up of Oscar De La Hoya at one point where they're just like, who cares about the fight? Just get all the crazy shit he's saying. And so Oscar De La Hoya is going in. He's saying that Steve Cunningham is chiseled from the gods and he looks like a quote-unquote Dodonis. He doesn't. He's saying that I would knock out Frank Mir in 30 seconds. He is continually referring to Steve Cunningham as the USSR because somebody said his nickname and he misheard it, and so he's like USSR is gonna get the knockout right now, and he is just fucking wasted in the booth to the point where it gets very troubling for Frank Mir, who is a former addict in recovery. Who after the fight like tweets at Oscar De La Hoya, who he could hear the entire time screaming at him. And it's a fucking nightmare. So then they cut away to what? Another performance. And so we watch Doja Cat.
It's a fever dream. You could tell me it's a performance by Salvador Dali, and I'd be like, yeah, that seems right.
But it gets even crazier. So we cut back to a performance, and we cut back to another fight, which is supposed to be the actual fight. So in the previous event, they had Jake Paul co-main event for Mike Tyson and Roy Jones. And so Roy Jones is like, and Mike Tyson are headlining it. This time they reverse it because Jake Paul is now the draw. And so instead, the co-main event is two quote-unquote real boxers. This fight ends.
Who are the real boxers?
No one knows. They're not actually like they're like whatever. They're journeyman boxers, but they can actually box. So it looks like there's boxing happening. So they're fighting whatever. The people who are calling this fight are Mario Lopez, aka AC Slater from from Saved by the Bell,
which we've established I have not watched, so that doesn't. I know him as the sexy Colonel Sanders from that short film.
Yeah, and to be fair, Mario Lopez does actually train, so he knows a little bit about boxing. But when he's the most knowledgeable guy on the dais, you're having issues. So these two guys are fighting, and the fight ends between the two real boxers with one of them pretending he got hit in the dick.
What?
He gets...
This is K-fob now?
So this is what happens, and it's embarrassing. It's like cringy. Like your whole soul, my whole soul left my body. He gets a body shot. So the guy hits him with a body shot. You can't really see what happens, and the referee has his back, or he can't see where the body shot lands. Mm-hmm. So his line of sight is hindered. And so the guy, I guess, realizing this, hits the deck and grabs his nuts and then starts writhing on the ground.
He flopped. I see.
Well, so no one realizes at the time, and so I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh fuck, he hit him in the dick, and because that's, it's a very convincing performance. And so he hits the deck, and then they start playing the replay. And then you see the replay, and you see that not only did he not get hit in the dick, he didn't get hit at all. The body shot does not land. So he's writhing in pain. He's committed. He is absolutely committed to this performance. So much so that a doctor comes in and starts feeling around his private area. Then is so convinced by that, she calls a stretcher, and he is carted out of the arena after having not been hit by his opponent.
If you told me this was Monday Night Raw, I'd be like, yeah, of course.
It is like an Eddie Guerrero thing.
Yeah.
It's like he threw the chair into the guy's arms and then hit the deck. Like that's the kind of
hit the deck. Like, no, he hit me. Right, exactly. The light, cheat, and steal. Wait, but like, and again, if that's pro wrestling, the cameramen are working with you, and they're not going to show the audience the angle that shows that you obviously didn't get hit. But
yeah,
the balls on this guy, with very tender balls, to do this when he knows there's going to be a replay.
Yeah.
I guess the ref isn't going to watch the replay in real time, but wow.
I mean, I was at that point convinced of one of two things. Either this was faked, because you're right, everything was perfect. The referee was in the perfect place to not see. The cameras were angled in a perfect place to see.
Ric Flair's even there.
Ric Flair's there. He performs so well that he is taken out on a stretcher. Like that's like stage level acting.
Right.
Because
that's WWE shit of like, we have all read the script ahead of time and we know that he's going to take a dive and get stretchered out, and then he'll come back at the end of Act 3 to hit somebody with a chair.
Yeah, which didn't end up happening, but would have been very cool. So that fight ends. Everybody's confused. And by the way, on Twitter, it's just the whole timeline is what's happening.
What?
The whole timeline is just what's going on? So we cut from that to the final performance, which is Justin Bieber,
But Justin Bieber's not fighting.
Justin Bieber is not fighting. No, he had a brief.
Okay.
He had like a brief kind of flirtation with celebrity boxing, and I think wisely abandoned it. So he's performing in Atlanta again. There's no one there. They give him the big stage actually, and he does a performance that is so chaotic that I think he tries to leave on 2 occasions and realizes he has more songs to sing. And you could just kind of feel him being like, I'm a shithead, and this is too crazy for me. Like,
yeah, like this feels like Justin Bieber's whole milieu,
right?
And it's too much for him, even.
Yeah, like his whole thing is chaos and
scumbaggery,
scumbaggery, and poorly thought out rapscallianism. Like that's his MO, and he's like, this is too much for me. So he leaves 3 times. The 3rd time's the charm. He actually gets off the stage. And then the Jake Paul versus Ben Askren fight starts. Ben Askren comes out. His nickname is Funky Ben Askren, and so he comes out to a Parliament song, which is great.
Sweet. Love it.
And then Jake Paul comes out, and he is followed by a robot. And evidently,
what?
It is
like a Roomba?
No, it is a giant Transformers-like robot. It is a guy who's like wearing stilts in a massive costume that must be hell to live inside. And the announcers inform us that the reason that he's doing it is because they have mascots in baseball and hockey and stuff. So why shouldn't boxers have mascots? I guess fair point.
Boxers aren't a team. No, hold on. Fight teams have mascots. Like the whole stable has a mascot sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Not like a physical mascot, but they often have a logo.
Right.
But like individual people don't need mascots because they're just one person.
Yes.
Their mascot's usually like an image or a flag or... Ugh, okay.
So, so he comes out with followed by a giant robot, and the people who are announcing, the experts now, are Pete Davidson and Snoop Dogg.
Oh, Jesus.
And they cut to them, and they are literally rolling joints as they're coming down to the ring.
I mean, at this point, that seems like the only way to get through the rest of this fight.
Right. I mean, but little did they know it would not last long. And so here's what ends up happening in the fight. It's very short. Jake Paul knocks out Ben Askren within a minute. And Ben Askren, he looks out of shape. He looks like a guy who just had hip replacement surgery. He's moving very stiff. He doesn't look good. His punches aren't very snappy.
That's tough.
But here's the thing. It's a grift. Because all of the promos, Ben Askren is doing the perfect thing to sort of couch, to couch his victory and his defeat. He's saying that if Jake Paul is a good boxer, which none of us know whether or not that's true, then he'll beat me because I'm not good at boxing. I don't think Jake Paul's a good boxer, so I think that I'm going to beat him. And that's his whole narrative, and that he keeps perpetuating it. So he gets he gets knocked out. He gets up. He smiles and walks back because he just got paid more money than he's ever been paid in his whole life. According to him, it's more than he made in the UFC in all of his fights combined. And there's video footage of him walking down the hallway, just smiling and not giving a shit. And you're like, this is crazy. And meanwhile, Jake Paul is like, they both got what they wanted. He got all the money that he wanted, and then Jake Paul is like, I beat a UFC fighter. Yeah, and he's like running around, he's hugging his robot, his fucking crazy brother is there. They're all having a good time. He's pretending like he did something monumental, and he gets essentially Ben Askren gave him his reputation for, $3 million or whatever the fuck he got paid.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
It was crazy.
Jake Paul a good boxer?
Again, I mean, it's what Ben Askren says stands. So what Jake Paul has done is he's knocked out 3 guys who are not boxers. Now, here's what happened in the aftermath. Is there's a lot of boxing fans who are, and I count myself among them. But an opinion like this will get me called the damnable casual. That's
filthy casual
will be placed upon me. But here's what they're saying. They're saying that this is all bullshit. Jake Paul isn't fighting anybody. He hasn't fought anybody in his first 3 fights. You look at any pro boxer, go onto their record. You don't know anybody on their record until you get to like the 25th fight.
Yeah, nobody fights anybody in their first fights, right?
Nobody
they
fights
have to start
anybody
somewhere. Like, why would you fight somebody who's somebody unless you're also somebody? Like, you have to build your reputation on the backs of other people who are trying to build their reputations.
But so here's why they're mad is because Jake Paul is very smart. So the thing that happens often is that it's very hard to find Floyd Mayweather's first 3 fights or to find Manny Pacquiao's first 3 fights in the Philippines. Like they're building up a reputation. They're often coming from, very underprivileged backgrounds, which I understand. And yeah, that critique is totally legit. What Jake Paul and Logan Paul to some degree, although Logan Paul takes much more risks. Apparently, he's fighting Floyd Mayweather, which.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I mean, the world doesn't make any sense on a number of levels.
He's going to die.
Yeah. And he is 190 pounds. Floyd is only allowed to be 160 pounds. So he's giving Logan 30 pounds, which would mean something if it wasn't the best boxer of all time. So,
right.
It's
and we also specifically the best boxer who's made his name on being essentially impossible to hit.
Yeah. I mean, he just puts guys in the Matrix. It's like the best boxers in the world: Shane Mosley, Oscar De La Hoya, Zab Judah, all of these guys, Canelo Alvarez. None of them could hit him. Conor McGregor only hit him because Floyd felt his baby hands and said, "Oh, this guy can hit me all night. Nothing's going to happen to me." So. Yeah, so that's happening, but the boxing fans are like pissed because he's making money off of this, but it's really the smartest thing you could do because you don't really start to. I mean, he's definitely developing brain damage right now, but it gets very, very grave the longer you do it. So now, apparently, they're selling 2 million pay-per-view buys at $50 a piece, and he's getting a purse and he's getting a piece of the pay-per-view, and so he's making money,
and he's getting the extra clout for his YouTube shit.
Extra clout for the YouTube shit, and he's not getting hurt because he's not fighting anybody. And it's like that's what boxing is. The only thing that's different here, the variable, is that rather than making his name by fighting these guys who have no business being in there, he's already made the name and he's just televising those fights, the ones that don't matter yet, the ones that don't put him in any physical danger. And he keeps calling out MMA guys. And this is a great strategy, I think, because a Jake Paul fan or somebody who follows Jake Paul is going to tune in to see him, and they're going to hear, oh, that's an MMA guy, that's a fighter. Not knowing that the people that he's picking are people who don't do stand-up. That he's picking wrestlers.
MMA guys are all wrestlers. Right, exactly.
Well, there are some MMA guys
wrestlers
that
under boxing rules.
Yeah, there's...
Well, right, of course, some MMA guys. It depends on the guy, but sounds like he's picking the ground game ones, right?
Yeah, he's picking the ones that do jiu-jitsu. He's picking the ones that are wrestlers. He's calling out Conor McGregor, but not sending him any actual offers. And that's the game, right? That's the game, is to pretend that you're calling out guys that will absolutely destroy your whole life. Like, I don't know that they would sanction a boxing match between Conor McGregor and Jake Paul, for fear that Jake Paul might get seriously injured. And I think that if I were part of a boxing commission, I might not do it either. I don't know how they're sanctioning the Floyd Mayweather-Logan Paul fight. I still don't believe that's going to happen until I see it. And I think it's probably going to be a glorified sparring match or an exhibition, because it is ridiculous that they have sanctioned that fight.
Yeah, you don't expect Mayweather to, like, actually hurt him, right? He could, but
he could.
He's just as happy not, and because he also knows he can't be hurt.
Yeah, the last thing Floyd Mayweather did was he went to Japan, I believe, to fight an up-and-coming MMA fighter in an exhibition, and the MMA fighter took a straight-up dive, like a blatant dive. Yeah, he just and you know, it's Japan back in the Pride days was infamous for fixing
Japan's
fights.
always had a very interesting relationship with the reality of fighting. You know, their pro wrestling is more real than their shoot fighting sometimes.
Yeah, truly. Yeah. So that's the last thing Floyd did. Floyd does not seem to be interested in being involved in actual fighting, which it makes sense because he's getting up there in age and he has the 50-0. He beat Rocky Marciano's record. He's the greatest of all time. I mean, most people will still give that to Ali because Floyd is such a disgusting person. I was trying to figure out a way to put it diplomatically, but why even do it? Because Floyd sucks, and he's a terrible guy. So they will often be like, let's do a conscientious objector who was also a spectacular boxer who made an actual impact in the world. That's the greatest of all time. But yeah, it was crazy. Watching the event and realizing like there were two they were giving out belts, and the two girls giving out belts are the most famous TikTokers in the world. That's how they introduced them. So like I'm watching that, I'm like, who is this? Who are they? Who is it? But like there are kids who are going crazy. They're like, it's them. I don't know what their names are. but they're
This is you really are Batman being transported into Fortnite.
Yeah, truly. That's how he's gonna feel. Where he's gonna be like, "What is this dance? And what is this? What is this world?" And I'm like, "This is the future of entertainment. Just a bunch of nothing. Slap fighting, music, boxing between YouTubers, mascot robots." What's going on? I don't know.
On one level, I think there is absolutely a marked march towards truly Dada entertainment.
Yeah.
In sort of the YouTube 2.0 era, or whatever we want to call the Fortnite era, where there is this, like, it reminds me of the Crash TV of the 90s. Like, this is what, what's his name? The writer of Raw in the, I can't remember his name now, but Vinny something. Doesn't matter. This is what Crash TV, like the Monday Night Wars, were all about, of like smashing together pretty girls and like setting this guy on fire and like here's some people flipping each other off and then I'm gonna crash a car into something and just like sort of, a stimulus overload almost. And that feels very much like, music and slap fights and Pete Davidson smoking a joint and Ric Flair and just like this sort of roll call of vaguely resonant shadows of things. It's almost like Ready Player One.
Yeah.
Like the event itself has no substance. It's merely a cipher holding a bunch of other references to other things.
Yeah. It's just trafficking and stimuli. And
right. Now, go ahead.
No. If you have an observation of the event, I was just gonna say that how I've reacted to this and my media diet. But
well, yeah, no, I want to hear that. I think that part of it is simply I recognize that the critique I have just leveled at this thing is exactly the same critique that my father levels at the anime I watch.
yeah,
So, like, part of it is we are getting old.
yeah, I think that is 100% true. Fun fact: my dad used to love watching anime with us. He loved watching Dragon Ball Z. To the point where I
That
think
makes sense to me.
he would often remember when we forgot. Just was obsessed with all of the shit, and I think it did. Yeah, it makes sense to you because my dad likes the big spectacle movies, and that's kind of like what that was for us growing up. When
If you like a Jerry Bruckheimer movie, you'll also like the world tournament with Cell.
Yeah, where just everything just is destroyed, blown him to smithereens. But so I've gotten like much more. I kind of was like, well, what am I doing? And I went into this whole like, I haven't ever seen some films, or I've seen some films and wasn't at an age to appreciate them. So I was like watching this week when I had time, like pre-code era fucking Hollywood movies. Like I was watching like James Cagney movies and shit. I watched The Public Enemy. I watched fucking Little Caesar. I watched Scarface, the one with Paul Mooney. I watched fucking I rewatched The Maltese Falcon. I watched that when I was a teenager, and I forgot the end. I was like, what happened with the damn Falcon? Which I guess kind of it doesn't matter.
That's kind of the point. Yeah, it's a MacGuffin. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, but I also was like, what did happen? And as I was watching it, I was like, man, there's something very comforting about this shit. There's something very like, I don't know. And then I started watching because they rebooted this. I had never seen it. The David Carradine show from the 70s called Kung Fu.
Oh, Kung Fu. I've got an interesting observation about Kung Fu, but wait, were you watching the reboot or the David Carradine?
No, I was watching the original because I'd never seen it, and it's a sort of a pop culture reference point. It's a very controversial show, but it's also a very
this was going to be my point about it, because I am going to very soon start watching Warrior, which has been brought to HBO Max to be renewed for season 3 after being canceled at Cinemax or Showtime or something. And the legend here with Warrior, it is based on a treatment that Bruce Lee was developing in the 70s to shop around to studios. Studios wouldn't cast him and wouldn't pick it up because it was going to have an Asian lead in the Old West in the late 1800s. And they didn't want to take a risk at the time in a massively racist industry. And potentially, although there's like, no, we came up with it independently, whatever, a lot of those ideas went on to become David Carradine's Kung Fu instead.
Yeah, so the show is baffling on a number of levels. The way that I understood, and yeah, there is the lore around it is that Bruce Lee developed a treatment for a show that would be stolen by Warner Brothers and turned into what became Kung Fu. And it's apocryphal, but I think it's true. Like, I think it's hard to prove.
But that doesn't. But like with everything we know about that industry,
Yeah, exactly.
of course it's true.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think there's documentation, but it's true, right? It's just, so you just say that uncontroversially, it's true. Yeah, but so yeah, I have a very kind of like, I wanted to see the show because it is this. It influences a lot of.
It influenced a huge, swath of popular culture and also all of Quentin Tarantino's work to the point of having Carradine in Kill Bill as Bill, right?
Yeah. So Tarantino's aesthetic is like very much for Kill Bill, for mostly for Kill Bill, is like it's a Western kung fu show. Like, that's the basis of the show. And that is what Kill Bill essentially is. It's broken up into volumes where one volume is more Western and one volume is more martial arts. But as a fully realized sort of project, it is kind of a distillation of Lady Snowblood, which he stole the sort of narrative arc of the film from, and then Kung Fu, which he stole the kind of aesthetic and the values of. And yeah, it's an interesting show. I mean, it is yellow-faced to an extreme degree where I watch it and I am baffled, because the conceit of the show is that David Carradine is half Chinese, half white, so that he is visibly, according to people in the show, a Chinese person. And so they often refer to him using racial slurs for Chinese Americans. And it is so incongruous that every time they do that, you kind of catch yourself and you go, oh, they're talking about him. Because it just doesn't
like
make...
looking over his shoulder, like, who are they talking about?
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. And then the only... Because it's Star Trek-ish, like the original series. So every single episode, there's a different story happening.
He's wandering, right?
Yeah, he's just wandering around. And what the only characters who are consistent characters in the story are characters that David Carradine actually never acts opposite of. It's always the Shaolin monks at the temple that he trained at, and the child version of him. So the child actor is doing this sort of parallel narrative. And so every episode is sort of interweaving lessons that he learned at the temple with whatever is happening in the story to him as an adult. Yeah, and so it sucks because the show is pretty good, and David Carradine is good in it, but it's just a baffling show. I mean, it's a relic.
It's a relic, and it's one of those things, like, kind of like, do I want to read Freud or whatever? It's incredibly influential and had massive ripples through entertainment and through pop culture, but isn't necessarily, like, is it worth watching? And so here's what's interesting about the ripples it had. One, the fact that Greg Berlanti, of all people, is producing the Kung Fu reboot consciously as we're trying to reclaim this and be, culturally sensitive. But what is Greg Berlanti known for? Well, he's known for a bunch of these superhero shows, which Kung Fu absolutely influenced, even to the point of the Incredible Hulk, the Lou Ferrigno Incredible Hulk, was consciously Kung Fu.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, Banner is wandering around town to town on the run, having episodic sort of anthology-type adventures. And though that sort of TV show, Monster of the Week, essentially, superhero narrative, absolutely ends up falling into the superhero show we now know and love and have been inundated with, especially Arrow. Greg Berlanti's first project of superhero stuff, which has an interwoven narrative of the lessons that Oliver Queen learned on the island, interwoven with whatever's happening to him with his Monster of the Week thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Kung Fu is massively important. And so it's so interesting that, and this is a good segue into things that are coming up for us. Warrior being this, essentially trying, it's in conversation and in collaboration with Bruce Lee's estate and his daughter or something, or his widow maybe. And it has a bunch of, specifically, consciously progressive representation of Asians on screen. I was reading about the David Carradine Kung Fu because I just happened to go down this rabbit hole because I'm going to start watching Warrior, about how the Asian American Actors Association, or some kind of union, at the time when Kung Fu came out, initially protested David Carradine's casting, and then retracted their protests because they realized that they ended up being able to cast a bunch of supporting actors, and it was a really, really good source of jobs for Asian actors.
Yeah, that's
just not David Carradine.
Yeah, that was the one. That's the sort of point I was driving at and just forgot to make. Is that the core characters in the show are all, with the exception of David Carradine, are all Asian and Asian American actors. And so, it is weird in that way, where there are so many opportunities available in the 70s for actors who might not otherwise have gotten it. It's a real sort of deal with the devil type thing.
Yeah, and that deal with the devil, Warrior is this kind of, and the Kung Fu reboot, where they're trying to sort of reclaim this, because the U.S. and U.S. entertainment has always been massively fascinated with martial arts, but mostly in this, massively fetishistic Orientalist way. And so now there are two things coming. The first teaser trailer for Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings from Marvel has dropped.
Yep.
And everybody involved with Shang-Chi, when it finished filming before COVID, and when they thought they were going to release it, had this incredibly, excited pitch about this is, Black Panther for Chinese people. This is it's an almost entirely Asian cast. It's really exciting. It's, really, it is affirming and representative, and this is great. And it's so interesting that, I'm really stoked about it. It's got a lot of awesome actors in it. And the trailer is super, super cool. It's the Marvel model. Everything looks the same as every other Marvel movie, except they're all Asian actors. So, fine. It'll be sweet. The fights look sweet. But it's this... it almost feels like blaxploitation of this, we're now making this. We're taking ownership of this model that we have been fetishized for previously.
Yeah.
And which is a valid and important form of reclaiming your culture. I mean, it happens in the queer movement, it happens everywhere. It's great. What's funny is that Mortal Kombat's also coming out.
Yeah.
By the time you listen to this, Mortal Kombat will be out, and I am mustering up the stomach to watch this thing because I love Mortal Kombat. I love the world of Mortal Kombat. I think the story is bonkers, and I love the parallel universes and the invasion of Outworld and Shao Kahn and all those guys. It's great. It's insane, and it works perfectly. Those crossover shows, the crossover games with DC, work perfectly because they have the exact same, there's time travel, and there's multiple realities, and people die and come back from the dead all the time. It's just a comic book. But it's also very much rooted in the 90s, and rooted in the American fetishization of martial arts. And all of those initial characters are walking stereotypes.
Yeah.
So the actors and this new reboot of Mortal Kombat has a bunch of really excellent Asian actors in it who have all come out and said, we're really excited about the representation that we have on screen for this. Specifically, the Japanese guy who is in Westworld as Musashi from Shogun World.
Yeah.
He's awesome. He's great. I love him.
I mean,
he's in some other stuff. He's in this. So go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, James Remar was in the first Mortal Kombat movie. That's like,
I don't know who that is.
you know who James Remar is if you Google him. He's like a. They just didn't cast. They didn't cast like
The only guy they cast is this one Japanese guy who's in everything. He's in an early episode of the first season of Next Generation, weirdly, and then he's most recently in Man in the High Castle, and he's fantastic. And I'll try to find his name on short notice here.
Yeah,
but and I think he's the Shao Kahn actor from the original one.
I was gonna say,
But everyone else is white and stupid looking.
yeah, and they obviously can't fight, and there's like a bunch of. I mean, they're obvious like stunt doubles or whatever. Rob, are you talking about Robin Shao?
So he's actually, I think he's Shang Tsung in the original.
Gotcha.
And he went on to do voice work for this character forever, basically. I'll try to figure out his name. Here we go. Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa. Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa is a legendary Japanese actor. He is in everything. But Man in the High Castle, 47 Ronin, he's in Rising Sun with Sean Connery and Wesley Snipes. For a while, he was just like the Japanese dude that you'd cast constantly.
Gotcha.
But and he's one of these characters who, because he's in the Mortal Kombat movies, which is this weird kind of like, well, if I'm gonna be in this fetishistic stereotype thing, I'll give it my all, and he's great in it. And then he was so good that he just did all the voice work for Shang Tsung for the next like 2 decades.
That's cool. I just realized looking at the casts for Mortal Kombat and Mortal Kombat Annihilation that there was like that they recast Raiden. I was so confused.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, Raiden in Annihilation is James Remar, and the first one it's Christopher Lambert. Both of who are the.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes, because Christopher Lambert is in Black Lightning now.
Yeah, they're both that guy actors. Where you're like, oh, that guy,
just like square-faced white dude.
Yeah, I mean, those movies are an abomination that I remember liking when I was a kid when they came out, just because it's kind of like anything Star Wars will be like, oh, this is I like this because I like to exist in this world. But the movies are
I just like seeing this.
Yeah.
I remember loving those movies. I thought they were great. I have never not watched them in probably 20 years.
No, it's a few things though. So, the representation thing sucks when Disney is the one that's helming that for you. So it's like, because you often talk about queer baiting and stuff like that, and it's all sort of it's all desirable until it happens, and then you get a Disney-fied version of the thing you want. And
The thing you thought you wanted.
yeah, when you watch it, you're like, although I don't know, I guess Black Panther did really connect. It's a real toss up how Disney is going to handle anything. Like, you could have a Black Panther, you could have a Mulan. You never know what's going to happen. Mulan, the live action remake.
Yeah, live action Mulan, right?
Yeah, so that's a tough one. And I hope the movie is good, and it looks good. I hope there's some depth to it, and because it's usually the thing that's lacking in Disney films is like a true sense of depth that I think that they managed to pull off in Black Panther, and that was largely because of the people that they put in creative positions. So I don't know much about the people who are making. What is it called? Shang-Chi?
Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi. but holding out hope that it's going to be good. On Mortal Kombat, they released a 7-minute first scene of it, so you can get a sense there is a fight that happens, and I think that it's so because you're like squeamish, but you watched Kill Bill, right?
I did, and I did not like the 88 crazy axe dudes. Thought that was gross.
I mean, this is like that level of ridiculous, but the blood is fake. I mean, the blood is always fake in Hollywood. I hope, but
I would hope so.
But in Kill Bill, where it was like Tarantino used like liquid. And so it would be like,
and it was very stupid looking.
Yeah, but it was like fucking. It was kind of gross because it's like people are just like covered in blood. This is all digital. It's CGI blood, and so as we were watching it, we were like, the first 7 minutes thing. It was like, this is very, very cool. You were introduced to some characters at the very beginning there that I was stoked to see. And then when the fight started breaking out and you saw the first set piece, at least when we saw the first set piece, it was like ridiculously fun. And it was weird because my wife does not like a lot of this shit that we do for this show. But she was like, we got to watch that when it comes out. And I was like, bet. Yeah, well, let's do it. Because it is legit good fight choreography.
Well, that's what I hope for. I mean, very much like Godzilla vs. Kong, this is a glorified set of set pieces.
Yeah.
Like, it is the... Mortal Kombat has always been the most, sort of thin through lines of narrative to get you between fights.
Yeah. We want our fireballs. We want our
as long as the fights are good.
Yeah, we want our scorpions. We want our Johnny Cage glasses. We want our Jack's metallic arms. We want all the hits. And we want the lightning. That's it. I don't give a shit, honestly, what the story is about. If they're traveling through dimensions, that's cool, but it doesn't have to happen. I mean, it could just be kind of a tournament, and that would be awesome.
Right. We know we love tournament arcs and narratives. So that's all fine for me. I don't know. Did you ever watch Machinima? I don't know. This is the short-lived web site and series of videos. Machinima, yeah. There was a set of Mortal Kombat short films featuring Michael Jai White as Jax that they did as like proof of concept, and then they spun them off into a web series, and they were like trying to angle to get more money, and they never really did. But it was, meant to be, I mean, it's mid-2000s, so it was like meant to be dark and gritty and realistic, and they probably haven't aged well. But I remember thinking that it was like a sweet idea because I liked the narrative of Mortal Kombat. But that's me just being contrary and like investing far too much time in the thing that matters least in a franchise. Yeah, I really care about the canon and the explanations of the superpowers of the characters who are only here to rip each other's heads off.
Wasn't Jax fighting the horse guy in Annihilation and eventually beat him by taking off his metallic arms?
I don't remember Annihilation that well. Maybe.
I think he was fighting the Centaur. I don't know who he was fighting, but
there's a big dude with 4 arms who's like,
I don't think it was him.
Like Minotaur-esque. No, okay.
But it was.
There's definitely also like a centaur creature.
It could have been any of the monstrosities. I just remember where it was like the thing that Jax needed to do was overcome his reliance on his metallic arms, which I always thought were like implants. I didn't know they were just covering his arms, which was the lore of.
Yeah, so I am guessing, from what I understand of the reboot, that they are definitely Winter Soldier style prosthetics.
But like that he doesn't armor. Like that those are his arms.
Right, that they are his actual arms.
Yeah,
I always assumed that that they are just his arms. That he does not have human arms any longer. He lost them, and they've been replaced with metal arms.
Yes.
But you're saying that in the old movies, he's just like wearing armor?
Yeah, he's just wearing
Has to take it
armor,
off.
and he takes it off, and then he learns the value of his inner strength or something. I don't remember why.
Wow. Maybe after COVID we should rewatch these.
Oh,
Maybe we should
man.
not do that.
I mean, I think that would be kind of nightmarish. Only if you know the vibe of we're watching this, but also we're not really watching this. If that's the vibe, I'm on board. But if you want to like do a show about him, like pay attention, I don't know that I can get down with that.
That's fair. Well, we will do a show about the reboot. We'll see how it is.
Well, so here's the
Probably
deal.
talk about it in the next couple of weeks.
We're gonna do because when this comes out, the last episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier will drop, and then we'll do a part 2. That'll be dropping next week. We'll do a Mortal Kombat the week after that. So we actually kind of have like a semblance of a little schedule going on, which has not happened in years. Mostly because of PTSD.
It's a new day.
Yeah. PTSD associated with scheduling things for the show.
Well, the last word, Hiroyuki Sanada is the name of the actor who is in the Mortal Kombat reboot and who is also in Westworld and some other things. He's had a real... he's also in the trailer for the Army of the Dead movie.
Oh,
So he's all over the place right now.
The Zack Snyder joint, which is like wild and berserk insanity. Like that's
Yeah, speaking of over-the-top violence. So I saw the trailer for that. The last thing we'll do here, I suppose. One, Tig Notaro, we talked about a little bit a couple of weeks ago. She's great. Very cool. So glad that they can just CGI insert her into anything they want now.
well, that is just so emblematic of Zack Snyder's whole shit. Everything in his movies is so fake that he can literally remove an entire performance with green screen.
And just replace it.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Like popping in and out prosthetic arms. Yeah, wild. But also, the zombies are getting much closer like Magic the Gathering zombies.
Ooh.
In the way that they are organized and kind of mystical and like have a hierarchy and a social structure and are not as gross, maybe? I don't know. I'm definitely not watching it with Maul, but I might watch it.
We got to do a double. Well, we got to do like a compound episode of Magic the Gathering zombies and Army of the Dead.
Well, I will definitely bring my Magic the Gathering background to my analysis of Army of the Dead and give you all sorts of theories that make no sense in context of a Zack Snyder movie, but make very much sense if Batista is actually a planeswalker.
I was gonna say like don't get too excited that there's gonna be like some kind of structure to this film. It doesn't look like that kind of movie, but I could be wrong. I mean, there could be a 5-hour version of it that is more about the zombies.
There probably is. And to be fair, Snyder's trying to build out like animated series for this too, so he's trying to build an extended universe here. And I don't remember if Snyder was responsible for... There was the Dawn of the Dead reboot, which he did back in the day. And then there was another one in like Pittsburgh with buildings. And one of these zombie sequels, which was like a sequel to the remake, where the zombies kept getting smarter. And they were slowly developing a social hierarchy, and you could like begin to almost communicate with them. And then those movies stopped being made. But I'm imagining that Snyder's picking up that kind of world of after death. You know, they get closer to like being vampires, where they have a parallel society.
Wait, but you're not talking about a Zack Snyder movie. You're talking about a different movie?
I think so.
Okay.
I remember that there was, I don't remember what it was called. So there was Dawn of the Dead.
There was 28 Days, but that's British. That was like
Yeah,
Cillian
no,
Murphy.
there were some things that happened after Dawn of the Dead here, because they made like 3 of these. Anyway, that doesn't matter. We'll figure it out later. We'll return to this. I'll do a little bit of research before we talk about the Snyder cut of zombie shit, I guess.
And then
whenever that comes out.
It would be cool though, just as a final note on Mortal Kombat, if they had people like the woman who played Sonya Blade, or like the guy that played Liu Kang in a Star Trek like cameo time loop thing.
Oh, the old ones, you mean?
Yeah, like the old actors like show up in a fucking snow cave or whatever the fuck Spock did, and in the reboot.
Well, I hope they find a way to bring in Hiroyuki Tagawa as, some version of Shang Tsung, because he's just wonderful.
It might be too complicated for this type of movie. They might just bring him in to do another character, which would be cool too.
Yes, that would be fine. But they're already talking about. I don't think Johnny Cage is in this one, because they're like, no, we definitely are doing a sequel with Johnny Cage, or we want to if it does well.
That's so interesting. Johnny Cage sucks. And that's...
Yeah, he's the least interesting part of Mortal Kombat. I don't care about Johnny Cage.
Well, I think he's kind of interesting insofar as he's like... His character's so anathema to the world. It's almost like a... Who was that? The guy, Bill Dukes or whatever? Like, he's like a parody of tough guys.
Duke Nukem?
Yeah, where he's like a Hollywood actor kind of fool. But he's like... When I say he sucks, I mean he sucks at fighting. Like he's the worst one by far, and everybody kind of knows that.
It's like if Brad Pitt's character from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood showed up in a Mortal Kombat tournament. You're like, okay, you're a stunt dude, I guess.
Like he would beat our asses, but he's entering the ring with a guy that does fireballs. Right. He can't figure this out.
It'd be like Jake Paul showing up.
Well, we got to end it there, I guess. Us making a joke about somebody we barely understand. That'll do it for this episode of Is This Just Bad. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Is This Just Bad. Email us at isthistjustbad@gmail.com. Follow the Cosmologist on Instagram at Sergeant Bucky Bear. That's SGT Bucky Bear. And follow Maul on Instagram at Mad Maul Cosplay. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Is this just bad? Bad?
It's like when pirates board your brain, robbing knowledge, no joking. Opening your mind with a crowbar till you're woken, hitting Hydra, hailing hairs, have a time for hella reasons. We're more than winter soldiers with the men for all seasons. Listen closely while we share our expertise in cosmic comics culture. Demons free tuition to the multiversity. Mouse is psycho teaching perfect balance when we snap infinite gems into your ears. Dust our shoulders when we speak. Purple man persuasive beat. We're Randy Savage Randalls with immortal technique.